A week ago, I took my daughter for a drive. We drove along a nondescript mountain road and stopped at a drive-in to eat. I thought it would be fun to scare my daughter, so I turned onto an unpaved side road. Her protests only made it more amusing, and I kept going deeper into the woods. Suddenly, the engine stalled. Being deep in the mountains, there was no cell phone reception, and lacking any knowledge about cars, my daughter and I were left feeling hopeless. I wondered how long it would take to walk back to the drive-in we had just eaten at. With no other choice, we decided to spend the night in the car and walk to the drive-in the next morning. As we tried to keep warm in the car, night fell. The mountains at night are eerily silent, with only the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Time passed, and my daughter fell asleep in the passenger seat. I thought about closing my eyes too, but then I heard something. Even now, it sends chills down my spine, a voice or sound that was hard to define, repeating over and over, Ten. Su. Metsu. At first, I tried to convince myself I was mishearing it and kept my eyes shut, but the sound seemed to be getting closer, and I couldn't take it anymore, so I opened my eyes. What I saw was something white and featureless moving erratically toward the car. Its shape was like Jumira from Ultraman, a silhouette without a head, and it looked like it had one leg. It approached, flailing its arms wildly while hopping, as if it were Kenken, a Japanese game where you hop on one leg. I was terrified and nearly screamed, but for some reason, I was more concerned about not waking my daughter beside me, so I couldn't yell or run away. It kept getting closer to the car, but it seemed to pass by the side of it. Even as it moved past, I could still hear the voice, Ten. Su. Metsu. As the sound faded away and I looked back, I was relieved to see it was no longer in sight. But when I turned back to my daughter, it was outside her window, grinning with a horrifying face that I never wanted to remember, now located where I thought its head should be. I was beyond scared. Anger surged up within me that it had come so close to my daughter, and I shouted, "You bastard!" The moment I yelled, it vanished, and my daughter woke up with a start. I thought she woke up because of my shouting, so I wanted to apologize, but she was mumbling, "Harita, Harita, Harita," over and over. Realizing the danger, I desperately tried to start the engine, and miraculously, it roared to life. I hurried back the way we came, with my daughter still muttering beside me. I wanted to get to a place with people quickly, so I sped up. Finally, I could see the lights of the town, and I felt a bit relieved, but my daughter's muttering had changed from Harita, Harita to Ten. Su. Metsu. Without me noticing, and her face didn't look like my daughter's anymore. Worried about her condition, I rushed to a nearby temple. It was late at night, but the light was on in the residence of the priest next door, so I dragged my daughter and rang the bell. A man who seemed to be the priest came out, and as soon as he saw my daughter, he shouted at me, "What have you done?" When I told him we had gone into the mountains and seen something strange, he looked disappointed. He said it might only be a temporary comfort, but he began chanting sutras and started to pat my daughter's shoulders and back. The priest insisted that we stay the night, and since I was worried about my daughter, I agreed. It seemed my daughter had been possessed by something he called Yamanoke. He said if this state continued for 49 days, she might remain like this for life and would never regain her sanity. He promised to take care of her and would do his best to expel the Yamanoke. I called my wife with the priest so she would believe me. The priest warned that if we had gone home as we were, my wife would have been possessed by the Yamanoke too. He explained that it tends to attach to women, and until it was completely expelled, my wife wouldn't be able to see our daughter. A week has passed, but my daughter is still with the priest. I visit every day, but she seems like a different person. When I was in my second year of high school, my grandmother passed away. She had a stroke and collapsed once, and then she never came back from the hospital. At the wake, I was allowed to say a few words of farewell, but despite having written a script while staying awake, I broke down in tears and couldn't express myself well, which still weighs heavily on my mind. That night, my father was supposed to sit by the candles, but he apparently had to take care of preparations for the next day and clean up after the hospital. Since the relatives didn't seem to think to arrange a substitute, we spent the night without anyone attending to the candles. But in reality, it wasn't such a big deal if the candle was about to go out. There were people awake throughout the night, so there wasn't much risk of a fire. The next day was the funeral, so we were busy from early morning. My mother and the other women were cooking together, and my role was to keep an eye on the relatives' children. The funeral went off without a hitch, and after the attendees left, everyone sat down to eat. However, I just couldn't bring myself to eat. While my family had dinner in the living room, I ended up crying next to my grandmother's coffin. She looked like she was just sleeping, but when I touched her, she was extremely cold. Of course, she was being kept cool with dry ice. Ultimately, I didn't eat that day and went to bed alone in the room closest to the Buddhist altar. My grandmother's house was old but spacious, with a small garden in front filled with maple and pine trees. I decided to sleep with my head towards the veranda in that room. That said, I just couldn't fall asleep in the end, and as I kept tossing and turning, the night passed. The clock chimed 3 times. I thought, I need to sleep, and forced my eyes shut, but I felt like I was hearing something strange. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but the sound grew louder. It was footsteps. I heard gravel crunching outside the window, moving back and forth above my head from right to left. Then I started hearing a small sound like a little bell ringing. I thought, my grandmother has come to visit me one last time. I was closer to my grandma than anyone else in the family, and I often went to visit her in the hospital. But even when she worried about things like, do you have a girlfriend? Or how's your studying going? Or are you getting along with your friends? I didn't want to make her worry while she was sick in bed, so I lied to brush it off. Even though I've never had a girlfriend, I went on a date with a female friend and went fishing with some friends. Then my grandma happily talked about it to the old men and women in the same hospital room. My grandson finally has a girlfriend. She must be beautiful. He was shy when he was little, but he was a kind boy, she said. My grandmother passed away in the hospital before she could tell if my lies were true or not. Inside her, there was a complex feeling of relief that I hadn't turned into a hopeless grandchild, mixed with guilt for not being able to tell her the truth until the very end. Even after her death, I thought she was still worried about me, and that she came to say goodbye like this. It made me feel both happy and pathetic, and I covered myself with the futon and cried again so she wouldn't notice. Then, the crunching sound outside the window stopped. The sound of the bell did too. I thought maybe my grandmother had gone to heaven, but just as I was about to lift my face from the futon, I heard a bell ring right next to my ear. My grandmother was wandering around on top of my pillow, shuffling her feet. Did she have something she really wanted to say to me? If so, I wanted to say something too. I wanted to apologize for deceiving her, but also to reassure her that she didn't have to worry anymore. I wanted to let her know that I was okay now. So, I tried to say, "Grandma," and to apologize to her. The moment I spoke, she thrust her hand into the futon and grabbed my hair with incredible force. She pulled hard, trying to drag my head out, and as I desperately clung to the futon with both hands, my hair started to rip out with a loud tearing sound. When I realized that this wasn't my grandmother, I was too scared to make a sound. I thought I would die if I got dragged out. I kept my eyes shut tight out of fear, but when the futon that was covering me suddenly fell off with a thud, I opened my eyes in shock. A person with rough, scaly skin, like a body covered in scabs or scales, was peering into my face. I thought my heart would stop, and I intended to scream, but I couldn't catch my breath properly, and all that came out was a garbled, Gaffa. As I flailed my arms and escaped into my grandmother's Buddhist altar room. I stayed there until morning, hiding in the gap between my grandmother's coffin and the wall, staring at the sliding door that had been left wide open. I was terrified, not knowing when that thing might come back. I might have even dozed off. When morning came, I heard my mother waking up, so I went back to my room, and that thing was gone. Honestly, I thought it might have been a dream. I've seen stories where people wake up and realize it was all a dream. But that wasn't the case. After the cremation and the burial were done, I went to pay my respects at my grandmother's altar, and there was something there. I had never seen a ghost or anything like that in my life, nor had I ever felt a presence, so I had no idea what that scaly thing was. It was sitting right next to my grandmother's altar, in the same spot where I had escaped from it, mimicking my posture exactly. Its skin was still rough, and I couldn't make out its eyes, nose, or mouth. It looked like a snake about to shed its skin. It was disgusting. It just sat there, probably, staring at me without doing anything. My mother was praying at the altar right next to it as if nothing was wrong. My grandmother wasn't there. The only thing at our altar was that scaly creature. I was too scared and couldn't bring myself to pray. Is this what happened because I was so shocked by my grandmother's death that I lost my mind? If I was going to lose my mind anyway, I would have preferred to see my grandmother's ghost. But if I told my family about this, they wouldn't believe me. We've ended up surrounding ourselves with something unbelievable at the altar. This is a terrifying story I experienced at the university I attend. One time, in a room called the Refresh Space, which is like a lounge on campus, I was desperately working on a report that was due the next day with a friend. However, we struggled more than we expected, and before we knew it, night had completely fallen, leaving only my friend and me in the Refresh Space. As we enjoyed some light conversation, it naturally drifted into the common topic of romance. Suddenly, my friend said something unexpected. A senior told me that there's a jinx that guarantees anyone's success in love. I had my doubts, wondering if the term jinx is often used with a negative connotation, but I was nonetheless intrigued by the idea that anyone could achieve love, and I listened intently to my friend's story. Do you know the Expression Building near Building 7? That's where the gymnastics club practices, and apparently, if you make a wish to the human mannequin there, it will come true. I had heard various rumors about the school, but this was the first time I had heard that one. The thought of praying to a human mannequin seemed ridiculous, but given the atmosphere, I ended up agreeing to go with my friend to the Expression Building. The Expression Building was more antiquated than any other structure on campus, giving off a sense that it could easily collapse in the event of an earthquake. When I looked at my friend, the excitement from our earlier conversation about love seemed to vanish, and they were staring intently at a room on the second floor of the Expression Building. I started to feel quite uneasy, but my friend said, "Let's go," and walked briskly into the building. However, seeing my friend's back as they walked ahead gave me a very eerie feeling. I told my friend, who had already begun to ascend the stairs, that I was scared and wanted to go home instead. My friend simply replied, "Got it, see you," and continued up without hesitation. I considered waiting outside, but I felt so uncomfortable just being there that I sent my friend a message saying I would wait in the refreshment space. I waited for about 30 minutes for my friend to return, but they didn't come back. Since my friend can be a bit lax, I thought they might have left the Expression Building and gone somewhere else, so I texted, "Where are you now?" Almost immediately, I received a reply, "It seems like it's not working at all, I can't convince them. You should come quickly and help." The message was confusing, lacking any information about where they were. Feeling frightened by that strange message, I texted my friend, "Come back right away. I'm in the refreshment space." Then the reply, "I can't come back right away, it'll take some convincing. It's on the second floor of the Expression wing, so you'd better come quick." I was terrified and my body was shaking. He was talking to me, but what he was saying was obviously not right. I suspected he was trying to scare me with a joke, but there was none of his usual joking in his writing. It was similar to the administrative emails I received at Circle and at work. Is my friend saying that he needs my help because he is having a hard time convincing a human body model to come to him? I said, I have to go home now, sorry. See you tomorrow. I sent a text message and tried not to think about it any more deeply. I tried not to think about it anymore. I didn't receive any more emails from my friend after that. The next day, when I went to school, my friend was not in one of the lectures that she usually attends. Worried, I asked my friend on her cell phone, "Are you okay? Did something happen after that yesterday?" I sent a text message. The reply came immediately. "I'm just a little sick and sleeping at home, so I'm fine. Thanks for your concern." I was relieved at the normal response, but then I received a second email from my friend in quick succession. I couldn't find anything to say back to my friend. My boyfriend committed suicide this morning. He is still in a lot of trouble with the police and everything. You know what I mean? I was able to convince him. I'm scared to death myself. Since then, I have never had anything to do with my friend.